Nice t-shirt.
Thanks.
That's not a black music shirt, is it?
No, no.
That's a Sam the Record Man shirt. Nice.
It's a picture of Sam, wrong side.
Alrighty. Nice t-shirt, buddy.
Thanks. A
You're
gift from my
welcome.
wife.
What was that?
It's a gift from my wife. She has good taste.
She does.
Maybe not in
Yes.
men, but
Not in
in
men.
t-shirts.
Definitely not in men in t-shirts. Greg, when we after we went off the air yesterday, not yesterday, last week, we heard the news that Gordon Lightfoot passed.
Mhm.
Do you know this is the first time I'm listening to his music since he passed away?
Really?
Strange, yeah. Um,
Because you didn't want to, or you
no, you
couldn't,
know what? I
or
didn't. I didn't have. I wasn't physically in a place where I could sit down and listen to his music, and I wanted to be able to sit down and listen to his music because it's not. I mean, for some people, it might be music you can listen to in the background, but yeah, it's. There's something about his voice, the lyrics. It's just amazing. And I know that you're not a huge folk fan, but even you appreciated
absolutely.
Gordon Lightfoot. Yeah, I think
I
I'm
don't
so
think
glad.
of him necessarily as
Yeah.
folk. I mean, I know he is,
Yeah,
but he was a big part of my childhood that I didn't really consider to be like, whether it was Roger Whittaker, like we've talked about
yeah,
before,
yeah.
or Gordon Lightfoot, or Nana Muscuri. So, I mean, like, to me, that was just part of my upbringing listening to this music. It had nothing to do with folk or whatever.
Yeah. It was just the stuff your parents might have played.
Good.
I don't think I ever heard of him until I went to England years ago. Years and years and years ago. And my cousin, who's a few years older than me, said her favorite singer was this Canadian named Gordon Lightfoot. And it might have been this album. Or an album similar, but yeah, since then, I haven't devoured his music, but I've respected it immensely. And whenever his songs come on the radio, it wouldn't matter how many times I've heard the song, I would still listen to it. I wouldn't change the channel. I wouldn't change the station. And I was so happy that maybe 4 years ago, I went to go see him on my birthday in Ottawa. Special Chip, who goes to Ottawa in the wintertime? Special Chip, the day after his birthday, which is November the 17th, my birthday on November the 18th. He always performed at Massey Hall on his birthday. And I think it was the first year that Massey Hall shut down to start their renovations. And so he wasn't playing at Massey Hall, but he was playing in Ottawa. So I went to Ottawa, and I was so happy. I remember that concert just smiling and just listening to all the hits. Like, yeah, hits, but just all these songs that I was so familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And to see him play, and it was a treat. It was a treat.
To me, I'll turn it around and flip it the other way.
Yeah.
I've said it before that the Tragically Hip are Canadiana.
Yeah.
Similarly, Gordon Lightfoot is Canadiana.
Oh,
it's part of our DNA, part of the DNA of Canada.
Even more so than the hip. I think. Not that there's a comparison, not there's a battle.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I just mean it as in they're
Yeah.
both are woven into the fabric of what is Canada and Canadiana.
Yeah.
filmmaking.
Yeah. I think we can all agree if someone were to ask you, pick one artist or pick one song or, you know, and people had the time to think and just pick one. And I think from our era and before, you'd be hard pressed not to agree if anyone picked a Gordon Lightfoot song. Oh, it was just something, man. Something about his music.
Yep.
Anyway, he passed on May the 1st here in Toronto. But like all of our favorite artists and bands who break up, who pass away, their music just lives on. Yeah, man. Gordon Lightfoot. See, it's good we're not a huge podcast, otherwise we could have played music.
Yeah.
Hi, the following podcast is brought to you by Radical Road Brewery, the best craft beer in the heart of Leslieville. Find them at 1177 Queen Street East. That's Radical Road Brewery.
Hi guys, my name is Sean Menard, filmmaker from Toronto, here to talk about my latest film, 299 Queen Street West. And you're listening and potentially watching Welcome to the Music.
All right.
Welcome. Perfect.
Here we go.
Sean, it's a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for putting the time aside to join us tonight. Really looking forward to diving into some of the stories and, really how the project came together. I'm sure it was a labor of love over a period of time. We've had the pleasure of having a number of former VJs and people involved in Much on the show. What we really want to start off with is our mutual dear friend Erica M. What juice do you have on her that you weren't able to put in the documentary that we can use against her the next time we see her?
I don't know if I have any juice per se, but Erica actually came on board as my consulting producer on this project, and she cleared the path, man. She was incredible. Her belief in me, and I admitted early on that I had no idea who she was until I started doing research. She was before my MuchMusic generation of watching growing up.
Yeah.
But nothing but great things to say about a wonderful human being in Erica M.
So,
she really is.
How did that start? Was an intro made to Erica saying, "Hey, you need to speak to Erica. She knows who to talk to," or how did that intro start?
Yeah, I just reached out to her. I believe I was during COVID at some point. She was putting up a podcast where she was interviewing a bunch of former MuchMusic VJs.
Yeah,
and so it seemed to me that she was well versed in knowing a lot of these people and also just the subject matter from being from the early days and working on 10 years on camera. So I thought she would be a good place to start, having someone that can make sure that I'm telling the story properly, hitting all the marks, and and then I we did the contract and the deal, my lawyer confessing that it was his high school crush and couldn't believe that we had Erica M on board. So it started to dawn on me just how significant and important she was in this country for a lot of, especially adolescent males.
And they're not just adolescent males. We've joked about this before, and even my wife said I had a crush on Erica back in the day. So, Erica was Erica. She was an icon. Is an icon, not was, is an icon. But yeah, back with those MuchMusic days for sure.
So the movie, the doc 299 Queen Street West, is not about all of MuchMusic, but a certain time in MuchMusic. Was that because that was your time, Sean, that this is what you remember about Much, or was there another reason why you picked a specific time frame?
I would say it covers. I mean, it definitely, the film opens up in the telling the origin story of City TV, because you can't really tell the MuchMusic
Sure.
story without touching on City TV. Are most of your listeners from the Toronto area in Canada?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we'll get these references. And and then it's basically, you know, we go from the origins on how it all started to opening night, and then it carries all the way through. I always say, if MuchMusic was an athlete,
Okay.
in my opinion, my humble opinion,
Yeah.
its wheelhouse or its prime seemed to be 88 to about 96. That's when it was really cooking.
Yeah.
People, you know, it was down there at 299 Queen Street West, right on the corner. And it was right before it started to jump the shark and totally sell out. And it just, that seemed to be the 88 to 96. It's kind of the pocket that the film hangs the most in,
Okay.
but it definitely tells the whole
Okay.
gambit of 30 years of history.
Yeah, you talk about the early days of City, and we've had Chris Ward on, which was a pleasure talking to Chris. And we talked a lot about city limits. Knowing that, again, I was watching it back then. You're younger than myself. What did you get out of that? You mentioned it was so important of how City and set the stage for what became Much.
Yeah, City Limits. And I actually highly recommend Christopher Ward's book, Is This Live? It does an incredible oral history look back, and it's a great read. I recommend anyone picking up. I believe you can get it on Amazon. But going back and learning about, I had no idea what City Limits was. And then you start stumbling upon this footage and learning that it really was the pilot to MuchMusic. And the fact that the beautiful part is they had no money, no funding, but there was a beautiful freedom in that, because if you don't have money to throw at things and solve problems, the only way you can really figure it out is creatively. And sometimes it ends up being a better solution. In this case, they had no studio. It was this little control room. So let's embrace the space. And it's interesting because as that grew, you see that now on television everywhere, right? Where you see the people working behind them, and they have, and some places, this is even in America on network television, they do that. So the idea of them being, coming from a place of, we don't really have a studio, so let's just shoot this, and having all that freedom, it birthed a real, I always say that what came out of there in that time period and those guys really started a television revolution.
Yeah, you talked about hearing Erica's podcast, but you started well before. Like, you were working on this project 5, 6, 7 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, I had finished a film called The Carter Effect. The executive producers on that were LeBron James and Drake. Ended up premiering at TIFF and getting worldwide on Netflix. And it was about the origin stories of Vince Carter and his impact on Canadian basketball. And right after that, I saw the impact it had, or at least to me, the pride I got was, this is a story that I grew up with, and it got to go around the world.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking, okay, how can I do something similar again? I've always tried to set out to try and do almost a trilogy of these Toronto love letters.
Okay.
That's my goal. So MuchMusic was going to be number 2. Unfortunately, the rights holders, Bell Media, and it's not their fault. When you pitch someone a Word document or a pitch deck and you say, this is what it's going to be, they're not necessarily seeing the vision. So every time I would make a new film, I would circle back. Hey guys, still really excited. Really want to have you guys let me in on the archives and do this project. And it was always we love your enthusiasm, but we're just not ready to do that. Or it's not something that we think, I'm not sure the reason really, but they weren't prepared to fund it. And it's very risky to make a film that is about a certain subject matter when you don't have the license to all that footage that it's about. So it eventually just came down to, yeah, you're right. 6 years, you're sitting there. I think COVID allowed a lot of us to get introspective and think about, if not now, when, if not me, who type of thing. And so I decided to just forge ahead, and I gave them the heads up that I was doing it, and I'd let them know when I wanted to circle back and let's see if we can do a deal. But yeah, I ended up just self-funding the project, started interviewing VJs, initially on camera to see how that was feeling. And then I cut a trailer and I sent that to my contact at Bell Media and Crave. And the next conversation was, how can we all be a part of this, and how can we give you whatever you need?
Wow.
That's fantastic. You talk about, and again, Vince Carter Effect is an amazing documentary. Anybody who hasn't seen it needs to see it. You talk about those effects. So the effect on Canadian kids growing up thinking, hey, I can play basketball, or I'm excited about playing basketball. You see it in, down in the southern US with Gretzky going down there, and we were all pissed off about it. Now we have Austin Matthews, who's not captain, but is leading, the Toronto Maple Leafs. You did touch on how the impact of that sort of a raw studio look and feel, carried into other, broadcasts and that. Did you find anything, I don't know if it's in the documentary or not, but in terms of the effect of those original VJs like Steve, like Erica, like Chris on what became the future VJs and personalities?
Absolutely. There's definitely an effect. I believe talking to George Strompolopoulos, who was one of the last interviews I got in this film, and I wasn't sure how much time I was able to spend or how much of his interview was going to make it, because he came a bit later, late 90s, early 2000s was his time as a VJ. But what's interesting is it kind of comes full circle with him, because he starts talking about how although he couldn't afford MuchMusic growing up, but he had City TV and he would watch their program, The New Music. And specifically, he would cite Michael Williams as being a huge influence on him and his career as a journalist. And so it's interesting because George seemed to be a bit of a throwback VJ when he comes on, because he was able to, that was the gift of all the VJs. They weren't necessarily, and I didn't know this until doing the film, is that they didn't really have on-air experience. They were just music fans.
Yeah.
And so they were able to get these conversations with these great musicians. And Welcome to the Music is your show. The effect to me goes beyond just the VJs and on-air personalities. It really is in the Canadian music scene. Mm-hmm. So many musicians that never would have potentially gotten out of their market or been able to have a record deal because of CanCon, the 30%, and because of Video Fact and having a platform for them, they were able to launch so many Canadian bands and artists and have them, sell out across the country. And then all of a sudden they break into the US and they become worldwide. And so to me, the MuchMusic effect really is the Canadian artists that you see even today in modern music.
Wow. Yeah, Greg, when you're talking about those VJs, so many of them have sort of created an afterlife, an after MuchMusic life, for themselves, right? So Erica, she's got her agency and then the stuff that she's done with mommy bloggers over the years. Mompreneurs. Is that what they're called? Sorry. No, we're not calling them bloggers. Sorry.
You should know that.
Christopher Ward, like writing hit songs. Monica Diol has a skincare line, is it? JD Roberts. What? he's
John Roberts.
John Roberts, yeah.
John Roberts.
Did you get a chance to interview him?
No, unfortunately. No, we didn't. But you see his presence. He's the first MuchMusic on-air VJ, right? So this film actually lives solely in archives. And so I made that decision early on because it does transport the viewer a lot better. So we never cut away to modern interview headshots. It's you hear the VJs telling their story, and it's mixed in with this archives, because to me, tape doesn't lie. So, you can have all these modern day people explaining why it's so impactful, but to me, the footage it brings you back there and shows why it's so revolutionary and entertaining. So, so you definitely see JD Roberts, and there's some great iconic moments in the film. And you kind of feel it and see it throughout. Really brings you back if you experience that time.
Did you I'm curious if Moses Neimer makes an appearance.
No, I wanted to have Moses. I actually originally he was going to be the only one I wanted to have on camera. So my
Okay.
first initial thought was, wouldn't it be cool if we don't see anyone on camera, and then Moses, the brains behind it all,
Yeah.
the man behind the wizard behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see him now, and he's in his modern day television museum that he has downtown, and perhaps there's some clips on these old vintage TVs of MuchMusic, and he's talking about what he was thinking when he created it. I thought this would be an incredible ending. I see your guys' reaction as I'm describing it.
Yeah.
You're vibing with it. I was like, yeah, this would be really cool. A great way to end it. So I had reached out to Moses and his secretary, and they requested to see a cut of it so that Moses could really speak to and make his point, which is a very smart request and not uncommon
Okay.
of someone of his stature to ask, hey, I want to see it so that I can really say something on point to what your film's about. So I was all excited, and as I'm going through these several months of editing, I started to realize in documentary, the story, it doesn't really matter so much about what I think it's going to be. It ends up becoming kind of what it is through the interviews. I'm having conversations like we're having, and we end up going down a road we didn't expect.
Okay.
And you have to kind of just ride that wave in the edit. So it all of a sudden became more powerful to not see or hear from Moses and almost have other people talking about him, or you're seeing him, but in the way that you would watch the channel. And if you go back to the archives, or if you remember back to watching MuchMusic, he was never really on camera, but he was talked about all the time. And if he was in a camera shot, he was far away, and he was this figure, dimly lit in the corner. So it ends up becoming more impactful to not have his voice describing about his genius, and he wanted to do this, he wanted to do that. If this makes sense at all. But so that's ended up what happened, and I ended up just making the decision that's a stronger film without his voice.
Wow. Is there a soundtrack to this?
So I actually hired the same composer that did The Last Dance on Netflix, the Michael Jordan series.
Oh, okay.
So he won an Emmy for that. He actually before that composed The Carter Effect. So in my first film, Fight Mom. So this is our third collaboration together. He lives out in Los Angeles. Had no idea what MuchMusic was. I sent him a cut. Said, I'd love for you to compose this. No pressure. Don't do it as a favor. Do it if it speaks to you. He watched the 2-hour cut, calls me back, and he was so impressed. And it's interesting when an American with no past relation to MuchMusic can say, hey, these artists that are in the film, these musicians, I grew up watching. His sister was actually in the Go-Go's. She was a guitar player in the Go-Go's. And he's I've seen these musicians my whole life, but I've never seen them like this. They're like real people, human beings having conversations.
Yeah.
And he loved it. And that's when I knew I had something that, I try to make something for a global audience. I really do. I know there's a cut that can exist, and potentially maybe some of the diehard Toronto fans want, where they really want to lean into the origins of City Limits and City TV. And it could truly live as a documentary series. It really could. But I knew I had something that was going to appeal to American audiences when I got that call. So there is a soundtrack, and he did compose it. And, when I blindly submitted to South by Southwest, just grown into one of the biggest, if not the biggest, film festivals in the US. That's where it ended up premiering. So it's kind of cool to get that. And we all, for some reason, need that up here in Canada, as the American pat on the back. Our stories matter, guys. It's not just us here in Toronto. People care.
Yeah. There was no thoughts of like a TIFF premiere before South by?
Yeah, I just couldn't get the film done in time.
Okay.
It just didn't line up in having that opportunity. And then definitely wanted to have that Canadian premiere in September. But unfortunately, I hadn't heard back from them. And then they don't really make their decisions. When I got in 2017, I didn't know till about August, and the festival was in September. So I I had to make the decision, I got to get this out to Canadian audiences. I want this big premiere event. I want to have the red carpet moment for all the VJs. I want to bring out some of the, iconic Canadian musicians, potentially some of the ones that were there for the opening in '84. There were some big celebrities that came out that are still very famous in Canada that we're working on trying to come out for the actual red carpet premiere. And that's what's happening. So we're September 22nd at Roy Thomson Hall, and people can buy tickets at Roy Thomson Hall's website or at the name of the film, 299 QueenStreetWest.com.
That is awesome. The reason I asked about, music in the film, the first song that ever played on MuchMusic, Greg, you know what that is?
Video Killed the Radio Star.
No.
That was MTV.
Oh, that was MTV. I'm sorry. Right.
Yeah. What are you? This is a Canadian content.
I messed that up.
It's a song by Rush.
I was Spirit of the Radio?
No, The Enemy with it.
Okay.
Strike. That's it. Greg's not talking anymore.
Apparently, I didn't watch much music back in the day.
Kareem knows his MuchMusic history. Wow.
But were there any songs that you were able to get the rights to play it, and wondering whether that was even a thought?
Oh yeah. So aside, I see your question now. I went on that tangent about my composer.
No, that's cool.
But he did a great job on that film. Yeah. But yeah, there is. I mean, if you're a fan of music, it's impossible to not love this film because it's threaded throughout. So the experience that was the goal. How can I make a film that recreates the experience that we all had sitting on our couches at home watching the channel? And to me, the most beautiful part is it was eclectic. You didn't know what you were going to get next. You didn't know what you were going to see next. You didn't know who was going to be there. You didn't know what interview was going to come. So there's music videos, there's this, there's that. That's the experience of the film for 2 hours, essentially. So it really, the biggest compliment that I've received is that how difficult it is to make that decision to go get popcorn, a refill on a drink, or go to the washroom because you don't know what you're going to see next and you can't wait to see it. So throughout the whole film, there's a lot of, we licensed a bunch of music, and then we also go through what's called fair use. You can play 15 to 30 seconds of a song or a performance.
Yeah.
Did you have any pushback from anybody, like taking some of that raw footage, or no?
No, I'm fortunate to be in this era of documentary filmmaking where others have gone on that hard trodden path, and I'm able to now benefit from that. So there's been, if you watch countless documentaries, the first that comes to mind, there was a Woodstock 99 documentary, either HBO or Netflix or something, but that where they really didn't license much, but they were still able to play some of the performances. So yeah, the rules now have really opened up on how much, and artists, as long as you're showing them in a positive light, I mean, there's countless musical moments and performances that are in this film where even myself, as I'm working on it, I'm finding myself going back, listening to that artist's album or going farther. So it's definitely positive for all the artists that were involved. I would be very shocked if there was ever any pushback from it.
Yeah. You, prior to this documentary, Sean, if people were to look up the type of documentaries that you've made, I think all of them are sports. All of them focus around sports and culture of sports. And your second Toronto, Love Letter to Toronto, you decided to make a music documentary. I'm just curious, why this story specifically? You're wearing a Blue Jays hat. I don't know if that's story number 3, but yeah, why not the Blue Jays or hockey or why was it about music, and why was it specifically about MuchMusic?
Yeah, that's a good question, Kareem. I've been wanting to get out of the box of sports documentaries for a while, and I call it a box because in this industry, that's really when they figure out you can do something well, they just want you to repeat it over and over again, which is great because I love sports, and that's really, my early origins were working at the Score Network in Toronto. So when I started my company 10 years ago, all I had was sports documentaries to show. So, yeah, and I don't know. So it ended up becoming, you just want a more challenge and you want an interesting story.
Yeah.
To me, it makes no difference if it's a athlete doing something outstanding or, a local guy named Steve Anthony that's doing, radio in Toronto that decides to cut his teeth live on the nation for the very first time on camera. So to me, the skills are interchangeable. It's just, that was probably another reason why it took 6 years. There was a belief that all Sean Menard does is make sports documentaries. So why does he want to do a music film? So, I mean, I grew up with the channel, something that I really wanted to do. And then I just had to bet on myself to show that I could do it.
Yeah. Was there anything, you learned who Erica M was, because she wasn't around when you started watching, but I'm curious if there was anything that you learned about the station. Maybe it was the process, maybe it was some behind the scenes stuff that made an impact on the station that you never knew about. I'm wondering if there was anything that maybe the VJs told you that was like, oh, this makes sense, or I can't believe the impact that this made, not just on a Canadian band, but on TV generally. Was there anything like that?
Yeah, there was a bunch. Off the top of my head, I was really shocked that how much of it was live. That didn't really dawn on me when I was a kid watching. I mean, it did, of course, but I guess when you watch through a modern lens and you see how rare, I mean, MTV was all taped segments, and there's a safety with that. There is it doesn't have that same energy. And so that was a big takeaway for sure. And also finding out the reason for it wasn't just because we want to be rock and roll and bring fans in. The origins was because it was cheaper it was quicker. You don't have to edit anything. It's just, you just shoot it and it's shot out through the satellites and there you go.
Yeah.
So, off the top of my head, I think that was one big thing that I definitely took away, that I was surprised to learn how much of it and the reason behind it.
And to dovetail off that too, I mean, it was also the unscripted. It wasn't just live. It was like Chris Ward talked about that. We talked with Eric about that in the past and stuff. It's just like, it was go.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I always assumed while watching the footage that they're reading from teleprompters. And then you find out real quick that it's not the case at all. And they don't have a director in their ear giving them a run. It's really off the cuff. They have to fill it. And then you start to realize what it took to be a MuchMusic VJ. I mean, Erica and Michael Williams and Steve Anthony, they're given these 4-hour video flow blocks where it's this chunk of time. You have 4 hours live across the country, and it's up to you to fill it. So in beautiful freedom, because you can play anything you want, you can throw to it. But Erica was telling me a lot of the origins of the research, because that was a question early on where this is pre-internet. How are you able to, and she's telling me how she's buying magazines, Rolling Stone, and she's trying to read other interviews, and they get tapes from when they're on broadcasts elsewhere. But so there's a beautiful discovery when you're under-researched, in a sense, because you're forced to ask questions that you really don't know the answer to. And then on the other side, the audience is getting this stuff that they don't know because they're so non-accessible. When, Pick the Artist is going to be in town, if you're a fan of their music, you've never really seen and heard them speak before. So it becomes must-see television, must-see TV in a sense. So, man, Greg, that's a great point, man. No prompters, unscripted. And it just had this beautiful, chaotic rhythm to it that was another reason. Like, I just got to lean into these archives and let these moments breathe to get that experience.
There's also the, you had MTV with their Unplugged series, which was cool. But then you had Much that literally just opened their doors and had people come in for intimate and interactive. Literally the same space that they were doing the regular shows in, but now, throw in some chairs and just open the windows, the garage doors, whatever they were, and you close down the streets so that whoever it was, name that band, name that artist, would have a 15-20 minute chat and then just play a bunch of songs. That's nuts. That's crazy.
It is. And that's a real testament to Moses, because when he got that building, they didn't have those doors and those windows. He got those custom and installed because he wanted to remove the barrier of audience and television being made. He wanted that magic to seem accessible, or to understand the process and invite the viewers and the audience in. And you're right. I mean, it is crazy. I was doing some test screenings, and I had a couple buddies with teenage kids. Their minds were blown. That happened in Toronto, and you could just show up. You don't pay money, and they know these artists, of course. So it was revolutionary. It talks about it in the film. David Kynes was operations manager there. He started out as an editor on the New Music and worked his way up to VP. And he talks about when they wanted to do something live, of course, they were influenced by MTV's Unplugged, but he had heard something in LA, I believe it was a rock show called Rockline, where fans would call in and ask questions to the artist. Yeah. So he thought, okay, maybe I can combine both of these. And that's where the intimate and then the interactive part really kind of blossomed and coexisted.
It's just amazing.
The timing of it's crazy too, because pre-social media, that was the only way that you could connect with an artist.
Yeah. And you could physically, if you lived in Toronto and you knew ahead of time, you'd cut school or whatever it was to get down. I remember my brother and my cousin going down to Electric Circus. I think one of them still has a tape, but I think they taped it on a VHS. But speaking of Electric Circus, Greg, another skill testing question.
Oh dear.
Your way. When MuchMusic started, what building were they in?
You got this, Greg. You got this, Greg.
Yeah. For some reason, I have 140 East in my head.
What was the name of the place that they were in? Formerly known as?
He almost gave you the answer.
I gave you the answer, Greg. Yeah, see? Sean's with me. Sean spent 6 years studying this, so So it wasn't at 299 Queen. It was in a former dance club called Electric Circus. Hence the name of the show.
Is that the Queen East building? Was that
99 Queen Street East?
99. I don't know why I had 140. It couldn't be 140 because that'd be the other side of the street. You're right. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
Weird Al Yankovic, is he in the movie? Is he in the documentary?
Weird Al does not make the cut, unfortunately.
Because I don't know if you would know this, Sean, but was Weird Al the only non-MuchMusic VJ to ever get his own, was it his own day? Was Weird Al Day or Weird Al Show? Like every year, it seemed that Weird Al Yankovic had a day, and he would come in and guest host. I can't remember. Greg, do you remember? Was it his own show or just the whole day was Weird Al? But am I dreaming this?
Apparently, a lot of my childhood is missing from me now. As we're having this conversation, I'm realizing that.
Well, the film will take you back. It will refresh.
Yeah, but Weird Al was, I don't know what it was. It kept on. It was a shock to me. Like Weird Al. Why is he playing MuchMusic? Like, why is he coming and spending a whole day here? I didn't know. Like, again, it's a Canadian thing, right? We don't think we're anything big or whatever, but MuchMusic had influence. Like during its heyday, like musicians would make a point. We need to get on that channel. did MuchMusic box above their weight? What was it about it? Was it that there was enough buzz, or was it the artist really enjoyed being on a station that sort of operated in this relaxed, no one's wearing a tie, there's no desk sort of way?
Yeah, in the 80s, it's great because the artists are just hacking darts, smoking,
Yeah.
and it was embraced. And there was a culture there. I mean, the guy that was running things, John Martin, I mean, his office was set up in a bar across the street.
Jeez.
So you can imagine, you go to talk to your boss. I mean, he's drinking pints and he's getting his calls forwarded over there. It was very much rock and roll. And the artists, they loved it. It was so much different than MTV with suits and older VJs that really they're not really part of the scene or the music,
Yeah.
And there was just a respect. And of course, having to be that close with the fans and see their passion, because they would advertise so-and-so's, coming down. Bon Jovi's going to come and have a Bon Jovi day and have a barbecue here at 299. Come on down. And
Jeez.
people would show up. I mean, what did you say was your friend's brother or cousin that was on Electric Circus?
My brother and our cousin, they both went to dance at Electric Circus.
They must have been legends in your crew and amongst their friends for being able to do that. Of course, they have the tape, and I guarantee you someone has it. And that was the coolest part about this process, was that when we were starting to source, I mean, how do you figure out what to put in the film? There's 30 years. Where can we get all this footage from? And my archive producer, she would get leads off of YouTube. And then we would, hey,
oh, wow.
And then we'd correspond with the archives team at Bell. We're looking for this clip, and we'd send them examples. Because during COVID, what's interesting, timing is fascinating, because if I was able to do this 6 years ago, it wouldn't be the same film in a lesser sense, because during COVID, people had so much time on their hands, and individuals like Kareem's brother and cousin were probably sitting around stumbling upon a tape, and they realized, oh, wow, I might as well digitize this because eventually it's going to expire. And then they would throw it up onto YouTube.
Yeah.
Because so many people, I mean, that's the craziest part, is there was never a space. I mean, pre-internet, if you missed it, it's gone forever. Yeah. They rarely would rerun something. So you had to program your VHS or run home and actually hit record. And then you'd watch it multiple times because it was so iconic and incredible to see this artist playing this, or to watch you and your friends dancing on Electric Circus. I didn't know actually that Electric Circus first started out on City TV and it was during the daytime. That I didn't know.
During the day.
It took a couple years before Monica Diol and her producing partner convinced everyone, hey, it should be at nighttime. It's a club show. Yeah. So there's some great archives in this film. And I got to give a shout out to Retro Ontario and Ed Conroy.
About him. Yeah.
I'm not sure if you guys are, if you're familiar with him, but he's a legend. I mean, the fact that you have an individual that takes it upon himself to just archive all of these things from our youth, because if it's not for guys like him, this stuff is gone. It doesn't get remembered and talked about. And when my archive producer was giving us these clips from YouTube, I started seeing Retro Ontario watermarks on all these things, and started realizing a lot of this stuff is from who runs this channel. So I'm reaching out and find out it's this guy named Ed Conroy. Yeah. And I was like, Ed, why are you doing this? And he very much talked about his passion, and people are forgetting about it. He wants his kid to know all this stuff. And so he came on as our archive consultant late in the project, but was so impactful because he's an encyclopedia when it comes to all this stuff.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, like, the impact, like, would you have had a demo to show to Bell without the stuff that he had?
No, to be honest with you, if it's not for the individuals, because Bell wasn't putting these clips on. I mean, there was a few, but by and large, it's the fans. MuchMusic was for the fans. Yeah. And they respected and embraced their fans. They allowed their fans to drive what was being played through requests, they would mail in their art. I always thought that was fascinating. You take the time to make a request and you spend all this time making this art piece, then you mail it in a physical mailbox, and then you wait and have to watch every single day in the hopes that they play that song that you want to hear. And unless you own that album, but you're not seeing that music video anywhere. I always thought that was fascinating. But so they had this amazing respect for the fans, and that was very much through Moses's ethos that it's for the audience. And then eventually, YouTube comes around, and you lose that ability to wait for anything. Now I can just watch every music video. Why am I tuning into here? They pivot on their programming. They very much jump the shark and allow marketing and all this other stuff to impact the programming. But then you have the fans all these years later throwing all this stuff on YouTube. And I very much consider myself a fan growing up with this channel and watching it every single day after school. And then you're able to draw from it and pull it. And like you said, yeah, my trailer was based on YouTube clips from fans putting that up. And in fact, there's some of those clips that don't exist in archives for whatever reason.
Whoa.
And so we end up just reaching out and getting the VHS tape and putting that on the air to create the look and style of what it was like to watch something the second time that you watched it on a VHS tape. So there again, trying to create that experience of what it was like to watch this channel. You end up leaning into some of that stuff. At first, 95% of the footage that's in that film of the 2 hours was not digitized. It was sitting on tapes on shelves. So we're able to preserve that stuff is incredible. But yeah, wow, it's a trip. But that wouldn't exist if it wasn't for YouTube. Very much is the foundation that rocked and killed MuchMusic. There's all these other factors for sure, but the main reason of why people were tuning in 100% was to watch the music videos.
Yeah.
That was right. There's obviously there's other confluences, but the main thing, once you have that taken away and but it's interesting that is the thing that kept it alive all these years later and led to a film like this.
Wow. So you talk about the footage. I know there's a couple of other docs that are in the works right now with Spirit of the Radio, the CFNY story that they're working on. I know there's a Nash the Slash doc that they're working on, and they're calling for a lot of that crowdsourced content because that's not available. Whereas you would have had access to a lot of archived footage that's, on the shelf within the Bell property. How much of the documentary is did you use the actual crowdsourced content? I think you implied or mentioned earlier you did. How much of it was that sort of crowdsourced content versus what came off the shelf from the Bell shelves?
I would say maybe 5 or 10% from crowdsource.
Okay.
And then we're looking at about 95% from the shelves.
Wow. Okay.
It's
interesting
really,
you obviously would have people very excited, much like Retro Ontario, to be part of it, whether it's, from a consulting basis or just be able to contribute the footage.
Yeah. And that was the coolest part, is to be able to take Ed. He had never been to the physical archive.
Oh, wow.
Museum, almost, it feels like. And you have these Bell employees that are down in the basement of 299 Queen Street West. In my opinion, they have the most important job in the building, preserving all that. So to be able to take Ed there and for him to be seeing all these tapes and, touching them with his hands and pointing at all this stuff. That was really cool to see it through his eyes, because being down there, it felt very much you're in just a very special place in Canadian history. And what's really cool is that this film now has, because it's had its success at South by Southwest, and it's coming back, and we're having our big premiere at Roy Thompson in September. Bell now is starting to put the resources behind digitizing everything.
Oh, wow.
So there will no longer be this, because those tapes really do have shelf life, and they will eventually erode and expire, and those clips will be gone. So, and it's a pretty expensive undertaking to preserve it all. But now that process has begun. So that's, if there's any legacy this film is able to contribute to, it's preserving all that very much belongs in a museum, and younger generation and people outside of this country get to experience and get to know about, because when you see it through a modern lens of 2023, you really appreciate. I only knew Moses Zeimer as a name on a street. That changes after you watch this film and you start to see, wow, that guy truly was a visionary and was ahead of his time.
Yeah.
And a great guy. And a great guy. He actually, I was at the Bovine one time, my band, and we're all hanging out, and he shared with us a secret pizza recipe, and we felt like we were becoming part of some
cult
or whatever within the cult of Moses. We'd laugh about it to this day. Anyway.
Okay, Greg, final skill testing question for you.
Oh dear.
Electric Circus. There's that one dancer, cowboy hat. Remember that dancer? He is the father of a prominent former athlete in Toronto. Sean knows who I'm speaking about, the player. I don't know the father's name, except to call him Mr. whatever his last name is.
I feel this trivia game is a little skewed in Kareem's favor. It becomes the information that Kareem knows that not many people know, and I'm gonna test Greg and put him on the spot. This is so niche. If I didn't do this film, it's the only reason I know about it. It's Dalton Pompey, and I don't know how prominent Dalton was in Toronto, but he
was
had
good for a bit.
Here.
He was good for a bit.
Yeah.
He had a couple of years here, but yeah, his father was that dancer on Electric Circus, the muscled, oiled dancer with the cowboy hat. I when I heard about that, I don't know, whenever Dalton was here in Toronto, it was like, what?
he definitely appears in the film. You can't include Electric Circus and not cut to shots of him in his cowboy hat, shirtless. I don't know if he was lubed up or if that's just sweat. Either way, he was glistening. He was glistening.
Absolutely. Sean, tell us about the Canadian premiere. It is later this fall in Toronto in September. Tell us, what can the fans and people who attend expect that evening?
Well, it's one night only.
Yeah.
It's not going into any other theater night. It's not going to any other show. I wanted to create a night where you have the experience of what it was like to have that shared moment with other people. You know, that's how a lot of us consume MuchMusic, running to a friend's house after school to watch Kareem's brother and cousin dance on Electric Circus. So it's really about having that shared experience, and it's more of an event than just the screening. Of course, we're going to have the 2-hour film that's there at one of the prominent locations in the city, throughout the country, at Roy Thompson Hall. But after the film screening, we're doing a intimate and interactive with cast of the film, the MuchMusic VJs themselves. So there'll be an opportunity, old school, to ask questions. And you're really going to be in a room with a bunch of them that have never seen the film. So this will be the first time the cast of the film will be seeing it. And then they're going to be so fresh from it out on the stage. And I'm in the works of bringing out some famous celebrities to help me kind of co-host that event, some Canadian icons. So it should be something special. And I should probably try and get the dancing cowboy, Dalton Pompey's dad, to be dancing in the windows of
absolutely.
You're giving me great ideas here, Kareem.
And maybe Weird Al could host the night.
Weird Al should host. You're right. You're right.
Him or Ed the Sock. I don't know what kind of evening you want, but that would be fantastic. I got to ask this final. Well, Speaker's Corner. Was that a MuchMusic thing? Was that before on City TV? Was that copied from somewhere else? Does anyone know?
Yeah, it was. That was Moses's brainchild. Okay. And I believe it stemmed from something. I might be wrong on this. I'm surprised. If Kareem knew the answer, I feel like he would ask Greg.
He would ask Greg.
But I believe it was something that derived from England. There was a spot where they would gather in the court, and they would have they talk about modern things that are going on, gripes, politics, and they called it Speaker's Corner. So he wanted to, again, this is especially when you're looking at this film through 2023, Moses created social media
That
before
was
it was even
literally Snapchat and TikTok before they even existed.
So I believe it was on City TV, and they would, I mean, you would drop in $1, I believe, and then you got your 1 minute, 30 seconds, whatever it was, 2 minutes, which is fascinating. I know a bunch of it went to charity, but also people are paying the network to make content. Is genius. And they would turn it into the best half hour, and they also would include it on MuchMusic for anytime artists were in, especially on the intimate interactives. They would cut to a question that someone earlier in the week asked on Speaker's Corner, and they would play that. And then, of course, I mean, one of the most famous. Okay, here you go, Greg. I'm going to ask you the trivia question to redeem yourself.
Before you ask, I know the answer.
This is like double Jeopardy here. This is the final Jeopardy. You're going to nail this. I know Kareem knows it, so I'm not. You're banned from this question. All right, Greg. Which Canadian artists, unsigned at the time, appeared on Speaker's Corner, and because of this, were able to sign a record deal? Go.
When this goes on to YouTube, you're going to back it up, and you're going to see me saying 3 letters over and over again. Bare Naked Ladies.
Bonus question for Kareem. That's correct, by the way, Greg. Totally redeemed yourself.
Thank you.
Kareem, what was the name of the song that they played?
You can be my Yoko Ono.
He's good. He's good.
He's not a good singer, but he's good at
No.
Yeah.
No, trivia, MuchMusic trivia.
MuchMusic trivia. That's
Absolutely.
all. And listen, they're basically a Scarborough band, so I have to know my Scarborough trivia. This has been a fascinating conversation, Sean. Thank you so much for your time.
Can I ask one trivia question? Name the MuchMusic employee that was responsible for my band's first play on MuchMusic.
First play.
Like first video play.
Oh, the person that played your video?
No, the person that was responsible for our first video getting played.
I don't know.
Can you give me the era of the?
It would be late 80s, I think. Late 80s. And it wasn't somebody on air. I'm talking about the person that was responsible to get it on.
Oh, Moses Nightmare.
No.
All right.
Simon Evans.
Craig Halkett.
That was going to be my second guess. He's in the film as well.
We were literally in Daytona Beach. It was spring break when they always do the shows down there.
Oh yeah,
and,
that's right.
And we were just hanging out in Craig's, and I'm like, dude, can you just throw it on? And he's like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Thanks, buddy.
That's the beautiful part about MuchMusic, though.
I
That's
know.
incredible. I love that story. That Craig Halkett. Wow.
Yep.
That is crazy. So the website to get tickets is 299 Queen Street West.com.
That's correct. Name of the film. And we'll also be putting up later on, because we're taking the film one night onlys across the country, basically in every major city.
Yeah.
So that's where people can also grab tickets if it's coming to somewhere local. But that's where they can get the tickets for the Canadian red carpet premiere event on September 22nd at Roy Thompson Hall.
That is awesome. Our guest has been Sean Menard. Go check it out. 299 Queen Street West, the definitive documentary about MuchMusic, the premier music channel in North America, for sure. Sean, again, thank you so much for this.
Yes, Sean,
I
thank you.
appreciate your time. This has been awesome.
My pleasure. Thanks, boys.